Okay, Christopher, Michael has arrived, so you can be relieved of that. Paul, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, in a few cases, people that I haven't gotten acquainted with yet, and so we'll consider you family that we haven't yet met, and there's quite a world full of those. But we do appreciate that in this brotherhood on the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum, that there's just an awful lot of very interesting two-dimensional people. And occasionally we get off the forum and to get to meet each other and discover what very interesting three-dimensional people we are. I've had that privilege a little bit this summer, and I really have enjoyed it. It is, among other things, reminiscent of the fact that my sweetheart has moved on to the next dimension, and so I anticipate the day when, in expanding from the two-dimensional to the three-dimensional, I can move to where she is in the multi-dimensional vantage point to be able to embrace the whole person there and allow her to embrace me again. But anyway, that's just a bit of my philosophical and theological framework. My interest this evening is to introduce John Christopher Thomas. He has previously presented one of the best presentations of the Book of Mormon I have ever heard, which was a quote from several people that heard his previous presentation. And that was the one on Pentecostal reads the Book of Mormon. Chris returns this time with capitals, and I don't think we're going to be dealing with capital punishment for the disciples, but he's going to be dealing with capitals, and I understand from his introduction last week that there's a pretty strong nerd twist on this one, but the Perspectives Forum is very good about opening people to the various and extraordinary efforts of nerds to be able to put things together. We've heard 2 sessions from Brian Stubbs on the linguistics that showed that we had over 300 basic fossilicular cognates from the Semitics that showed up in the Uto-Aztecan language. 30 years of research to be able to tell us that. We've had people that have studied the characters documents, and Faye Shaw is one of those, and she's with us again tonight. And I'm delighted to be able to recognize the people that have spent a good deal of time in study and effort. I think maybe the nerd colloquy is a substitute title for our forum. But in any case, I wanted to express my appreciation for his presence and for his genius. And I'm looking forward to the chance tonight for us to share, and we'll learn more from this great mind. And somehow I need to be able to move to the prayer. Oh, and by the way, the picture on this one is a picture of the Phoenicia, in as much as it's been restored in the Phoenicia Museum in Montrose, Iowa. My understanding is the people who are heartland theorists have raised several $1 million by which to pull this boat into Montrose, where they are displaying it in hopes of being able to highlight the Book of Mormon for people to think that the heartland theory is accurate. In any case, the fact that they are getting it assembled there means that there's perhaps means at least for more people to read the Book of Mormon. And so I put that in. I don't happen to agree with the theory in all of its respects, but I do applaud people who are working on Book of Mormon perspectives that we can employ here. Let us pray together. God, who creates and blesses, who heals and admonishes, who for some reason continues to be the human affirmer, we bow in appreciation for your grace provides a pathway for those of us of shorter vision, of selfish interest causing us to murmur. You open doors and distant lights to guide us toward eternity, while we tend to stay stuck on short-sighted issues of your paternity. This evening, we ask your blessing on our presenter, Christopher Thomas, as he focuses our attention upon a capital, detailing, refining our focus, helping us to a perspective with a spiritual sense more adaptable. And we appreciate that you are a God of greatest detail, whose creation follows patterns from photons to supernovas, in which your energies never fail. and we are inclined to be hard-pressed to grasp details or apprehend the cosmic view as we muddle through our lives, attempting to appreciate you. So we ask your blessing to sharpen our acuity, to help us to a higher plane where our intellect grows and can be firmer. Help us raise our thinking, our appreciation, our praise of you to displace our undergirding murmur. And this we ask in the name of the risen Christ. Amen. Brother Thomas, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks so much, Paul, for allowing me to participate yet again. As I said before everyone else showed up, this was one of the few places in the world that I thought would be open to a nerdy topic like we're going to look at tonight. And he assured me that it was kindred spirits all around. So thanks so much for that. Several folk that I know from other contexts are with us tonight, and I just wanted to say hello to them, Gary and Tom and Val, and a new friend of mine, Michael Austin. Michael is with us, and I've already been doing some work, Michael, on your volume here, and you may well get an invitation to participate in a different way after tonight. I am going to try to share a screen with you and see if that works. Do you see the title?
We have it. The significance of disciples.
Right, you got it. Let me see if I can do that in a little bit different way so that it's a bit, let's see. Yeah. Let's see if that, does that fit the screen a bit better?
No, it's still the same size.
Oh, okay. Well,
And I can see it okay.
all righty, very good. And I am going to try to pull up my manuscript and read it this way. Hey, let me go ahead and begin with at the beginning. Going to be a lot of words here. Whilst doing research on the text of 4th Nephi, my attention was drawn to the fact that in the printer's manuscript, the word disciple and disciples always appears in its capitalized form, which seems to be in the hand of scribe 2, according to the Joseph Smith Project volume or paper volume. This unexpected find made me curious as to whether this choice with regard to capitalization was a one-off decision on the part of scribe 2 that might be confined to 4th Nephi, or if something more might not be going on. My first instinct was to compare this finding in the printer's manuscript with the parallel sections of text in the original manuscript. But as most everyone in this audience knows, unfortunately, the text of 4th Nephi is no longer extant in the original manuscript, or at least has not to this point appeared. Faced with this dead end, my next step was to determine how disciples appeared in the rest of the printer's manuscript before comparing these results with how disciples appear elsewhere in the original manuscript. And what I found was very curious indeed. The first appearance of disciples in the printer's manuscript is found in 1 Nephi 12:8, with reference to the 12 disciples. And it occurs in its capitalized form, appearing in the hand of Oliver Cowdery. In its second occurrence in the printer's manuscript, 2 Nephi 18:16, The term reappears in its capitalized form again in the hand of Cowdery. The term's third appearance, found in Alma 45:14, once again occurs in its capitalized form, and once again in the hand of Oliver Cowdery. Significantly, or so it would seem, in the two places the word disciples occurs in the original manuscript, 1 Nephi 12:8 and Alma 45:14, it appears in capitalized form. The first perhaps in the hand of Peter Whitmer, the second in the hand of Oliver Cowdery. Now, such a I'm sorry here, let me, no, okay. Sorry, such a pattern from the hand of two separate scribes, not to mention the evidence of 4th Nephi from still another scribal hand, made me wonder if perhaps all occurrences of disciples in the original manuscript and the printer's manuscript might have appeared in capitalized form. However, it was at this point in the printer's manuscript that something truly odd began to emerge. For in the next occurrence of the term, and in just over 20 of its next appearances, the term occurs in lowercase form. And interestingly enough, in each of these places in Oliver's hand. Such a juxtaposition of scribal pattern caused me pause as I wondered and pondered what had caused this change with regard to capitalization. But my reflection on this phenomenon was interrupted when I discovered a mere 3 chapters later, when Scribe 2 had taken up the pen, the term disciples consistently reappears in capitalized form. In fact, the next 21 occurrences of the term appear thusly, and all in the pen of Scribe 2. Now, puzzled, excuse me, puzzled though I was, and I've got to figure out a way to get back over here. Sorry about this. Puzzled though I was in for yet another unexpected twist in the capitalization story of disciples in the Book of Mormon. For as soon as Oliver takes back the pen, all the 6 remaining appearances of the term in the printer's manuscript occur in lowercase form. Now, in order to complete the evidential picture, it should perhaps be observed that in the 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon, the term disciple is never capitalized, with the word always appearing in lowercase form. Now, I don't have any hope that you will be able to make this out, but this is, and I should have Michael do the chart for me, but this is a 3-page chart that gives the Book of Mormon text in the furthest left-hand column, the original manuscript in the second column, the 1830 manuscript in the third column, and the printer's manuscript in the fourth column. Just to give you some sense of what all this looks like. So having examined the manuscript tradition in this fashion, One of the first questions to come to my mind was quite an obvious one. What accounts for this consistent anomaly with regard to decisions in the printer's manuscript regarding capitalization, especially in light of the few occurrences of disciples in the original manuscript on the one hand, and the decision never to capitalize the term in the 1830 edition on the other hand? Or to put the question another way, what caused Oliver to change course with regard to capitalization, and to do so in such a consistent fashion? Now, related to that question is why does Scribe 2 consistently reproduce the pattern of capitalization found in the first half of the book, whilst Oliver is consistently using the lowercase form? My grappling with this issue has led me to the following reflections, for none of which do I claim infallibility. They are at best hunches, given the state of the data. First, whilst it is often claimed, and not without evidence, that the grammatical rules for punctuation and spelling in the English language of the 1830s were quite fluid, examples of which might well be found in various places within the 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon, it would seem self-evident that such an explanation does not convince on this occasion, given in part the remarkably consistent pattern of capitalization of disciples in the printer's manuscript. This pattern suggests that these are not random choices, but that something else has influenced these decisions. Second, owing to the fact that the first occurrences of disciples are in capitalized form in both the original manuscript and the printer's manuscript, it might not be going too far to suggest that in the original manuscript, the term disciple was always capitalized. The notoriously dangerous nature of arguments built on some measure of silence duly noted. Such an understanding would not only explain the capitalization choices at the beginning of the two primary manuscripts, but would also offer an explanation for why Scribe 2 so consistently used the capitalized form of disciple throughout the portion of the printer's manuscript for which he was responsible. Third, the capitalization practices with regard to disciples in the original manuscript and the consistent lowercase form of the term in the 1830 edition might both go some way toward explaining Cowdery's sudden and consistent shift to the lowercase form of disciples. If the term disciple was consistently capitalized in the original manuscript, as evidenced by the practice in the first half of the printer's manuscript, it might not be going too far to suggest that it was the decision of the typesetter, John Gilbert, to use the lowercase form of disciple consistently that caused Oliver to modify his own practice. It would appear that when Oliver, who seems to have been the primary proofreader of the Book of Mormon, saw initial proofs of the 1830 edition emerging from the press and discovered that the term was consistently typeset in lowercase form, that from that point on, he too always used the lowercase form. But whilst Oliver had modified his practice, it appears that Scribe 2 didn't get the memo, was never informed about this preference, and continued to use the capitalized form. Now, if this proposal is anywhere near the mark in offering an explanation for the change in capitalization patterns for the term disciple, it occasions another more theological question. If it is likely that in the original manuscript, the term disciple was always capitalized, what, if any, theological meaning might have been attached to such a preference? Another way to gain leverage on the issue is to ask a different kind of question. What might have been lost theologically by those for whom the book would function as scripture through John Gilbert's decision to use the lowercase form of disciple exclusively in the 1830 edition? Now, part of the answer to this question seems to be related to the different ways in which Gilbert, on the one hand, and the scribes, on the other hand, treated the word disciple in their respective manuscripts. From all appearances, it seems that Gilbert made the decision to treat the term disciple as a common noun, a decision which would normally make perfectly good sense, as any number of places in the KJV and other relevant documents would seem to indicate. If taken as a common noun, the absolute consistency of the term appearing in its lowercase form in the 1830 edition would seem to explain the data. However, an examination of disciples in their narrative context in the Book of Mormon reveals that the term is rarely used as a common noun, but rather seems to be a proper noun in the vast preponderance of occurrences. In most references in the volume, the term appears to designate the 12 disciples that the Lord would call in the Western Hemisphere, and I offer those texts there, including those disciples ordained to replace the 9 who would die and to serve alongside the 3 disciples who would never die. On a few occasions, these disciples would be referred to as beloved disciples. On only one occasion is reference made to the disciples in the land of Jerusalem. In point of fact, all but 2 occurrences of the term disciple in the Book of Mormon, aside from Mormon 3:18 and 9:22b, has reference to the 12 disciples appointed by Jesus in the New World, replacements for those who had died, or to the 3 beloved disciples. Clearly, such philological evidence indicates that in the Book of Mormon, the term disciple functions as a proper noun, and consequently explains why the word would so consistently appear in capitalized form in the manuscript tradition. Thus, it would appear that Gilbert's decision to take disciple as a common noun would indicate a less than complete understanding of how the term functions in the book. Perhaps one other observation should be made with regard to this phenomenon. If the readers of the Book of Mormon always encountered the term disciple in capitalized form, and if in all but one of its occurrences have reference to some variation of the 12 or the disciples in the land of Jerusalem, it might not be without significance that in the only reference to disciple outside this group, where all the disciples are identified, that there the term also appears in its capitalized form in the hand of scribe 2. Now, in this interpretation, it could well be that the readers would understand the role of all disciples in a somewhat elevated fashion, merging to a certain degree the role of the 12 disciples appointed by Jesus and the role of all the disciples, adding theological depth to their understanding of disciple and in turn discipleship. Now, before concluding this presentation, perhaps a brief word about the term apostle would illustrate the way in which parts of the Book of Mormon scribal tradition were unafraid to underscore theological convictions by its practices of capitalization. The term apostle or apostles occurs some 16 times in the Book of Mormon. Of its 9 occurrences in the original manuscript, 5 times it appears in lowercase form, and 4 times it is capitalized. In the 1830 edition, of its 16 occurrences, 12 are in lowercase form, whilst 4 are capitalized. But in the printer's manuscript, 15 of the 16 occurrences of the apostle appear in capitalized form, with only 1 occurrence in lowercase form. Significantly, Oliver's scribal work includes 14 capitalized references, as well as the only occurrence of the term in lowercase form. The other single occurrence of the capitalized form is in the hand of scribe 2. Now, interestingly enough, in only one of these texts does the capitalized form appear in all 3 of these early witnesses: the original, the printers, and the 1830 edition. Aside from the printer's manuscript, there seems to be no consistent pattern with regard to the capitalization of the term. At the same time, it would appear that for the printer's manuscript and its primary scribe, Oliver Cowdery, that apostles was indeed regarded as a proper noun. The caveats of the lowercase occurrence in Ether 1241, the inconsistencies of the original manuscript, and the preferences of John Gilbert's typesetting of the 1830 edition notwithstanding. So here's a little chart. Again, I'm not sure that you can make it all out. The Book of Mormon text on the far left. You see the original manuscript next to it and the places where lowercase and caps are used. The 1830 edition, which has a very interesting choice of capitalization. And then the printer's manuscript, which is almost consistently prone to capitalization. It is, of course, not my role, especially as an outsider, to instruct those for whom the Book of Mormon functions as scripture as to how they should capitalize their sacred texts. But such manuscript evidence with regard to the capitalization of the term disciples might perhaps give reason for pause with regard to the theological meaning of this term in the various editions of the Book of Mormon. So there it is, my friends. I'm happy for any conversation. I have taught and ministered for over 40 years, and there's nothing you can say that will hurt me.
We have no intention of trying to hurt you, Brother Thomas. And thank you so much for your kind address of what many of us consider to be scripture and the gentle little prod to make us consider such things as the question of just how should we capitalize our sacred text. That question, I think, is clearly worth our consideration. I'd like for you to go back, though, and maybe it's not appropriate to your presentation, but with Joseph Smith editing the 1840 edition of the Book of Mormon, I'm curious if you looked at that at all to see what possible adjustments he made.
No, I have not. Great question there, Paul. I suppose what struck me most about this was it made me wonder if disciple in the Book of Mormon functions a bit differently, more authoritatively, and in more of a shared fashion than the translations, the modern translations or editions tend to suggest. But the thing about the next edition, that's a great question, and I have not done that. Thanks for that. That will be the first of many comments I write down. So thanks so much.
Thank you for that kind response. And we have 3 hands up. Let me call people's attention to the fact that if you go to the reaction marker at the bottom of your screen, you can raise your hand and be put in the line. And Deb does an excellent job of keeping the queue sorted. If you can't get that to work, wave and let her see your hand anyway, and she'll get you incorporated in the queue as well. I think Wednesday is the first one on the line.
That's correct. Go ahead, Wednesday. Thank you. You're muted.
Hello.
Hi.
So thank you for your presentation, first of all. And my question is, has there been an instance when you're reading through the Book of Mormon where you find that the change in capitalization alters meaning?
Well, as a reader of texts, I am impacted by things like capitalization. And it makes me wonder when I'm reading the printer's manuscript, again, if disciples might be a more important term in the book, in the resulting church, than it turns out to be structurally, theologically. And so it's, to me, I could say the brief response would probably be yes, every time. But it's more cumulative for me, Wednesday, than, oh, this one, because all of the context, except maybe the one in the Book of Mormon, it really falls into, proper noun usage. It's the 12.
That's true.
Yeah, and so all of them get reversed, it seems.
That makes sense. I would say, if I said the 8 witnesses, I expect the W to be capitalized because that lets me know exactly which witnesses that we're talking about. We're talking about the 8 witnesses. So that makes perfect sense. And I'll have to go check to see, like, for example, if they're talking about like the 3, well, if they're talking about, we'll have to figure out, I'll look through and figure out some of the capitalization stuff, but I see what you mean when it becomes a proper noun. And
well, and how they seem to be so, bold as to go their own way when it comes to apostle. And the 1830 edition doesn't follow that, though in that case, we also have the original manuscript kind of split on those. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Michael, you're next, and then Val. Go ahead, please, Michael.
So my question actually is about your background more than the presentation. Why Abbey Road?
Oh.
Why not Rubber Soul or Let It Be, perhaps, or even Sergeant Pepper? I mean, what about Abbey Road?
Well, I don't know if you can tell, but I have been photoshopped in next to the white Volkswagen. And my colleague who did the photoshopping is on the other side of the street next to the black car.
Okay, I think the box covered that up.
Yeah, must have. And I'm not quite so sure if I can even just show the, no, I don't think I can just show that. Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, Val, go ahead, and then Thomas Murphy.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Val.
I think that you put your finger on something extremely important here, in that in the Book of Mormon, these disciples loom way larger than people sometimes notice. So right there in that opening vision of Lehi, Christ descends, followed by 12 others, and Christ is clearly in that descent a divine being. He's compared to the sun, but the 12 others that follow him are compared to stars, and they're also in context essentially functioning as divine figures. They're not just human figures, but divine. And you start getting this, I think they need to be read both as the people we know in the New Testament, because we recognize them from there, but also as they're initially presented in the Book of Mormon as figures descending out of heaven with Christ. A little bit later, it talks about them being caught up, passing back up to heaven. And then still further along, both those 12 disciples and the 12 disciples that you allude to in the New World, it talks about them functioning as last judgment judges. So, and of course, that's in the New Testament too, but that's the role of judging. The Father gives to the Son the judgment role. It's a divine role. The Son in turn passes it on to the disciples. And in the Doctrine and Covenants, those disciples are described as sitting on thrones. So at least within the Utah Brighamite branch, this elevation of the disciples and their sort of semi divine role is sort of indicative of where the theology ultimately goes, into the divinization of human beings. And the other thing I would say about this is, I think it's pretty well known that in the LDS temple ceremony, the descent and ascent of Peter, James, and John is an important element of that ritual. And I think all those things come together in the discussion that you're raising here of what is the status of the disciples in the text. I think and then of course the fact that our institutions tend to be governed by 12 apostles, all these things I think converge together to reinforce the importance of the question that you're raising here about the status of the disciples in the Book of Mormon.
Well, thanks for that, Val. I hadn't thought about either the connection at the beginning or toward the end. And that would make a more sort of comprehensive narrative take on the disciples. And yeah, I've made a note of that. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you. Thomas, you're next, and then Roger. Go ahead, Thomas.
Hey, Tom, good to see you.
Yeah, likewise, Chris, that was fascinating presentation, considering the dullness of the topic. You really
Thanks.
got me thinking.
That's about what I was going for.
I think that first suggestion of looking at the other editions of the Book of Mormon is a great one. But how about the Book of Commandments and the Doctrine and Covenants? Is disciple or apostle capitalized there? And another area I was wondering is maybe Adam Clark's commentary. Is disciple capitalized there? And then finally, the last one I was thinking of is about Alexander Campbell's writings. And of course, being known as disciples, do you think there's any relationship to the prevalence of disciples in the community, and then later within the LDS Church itself? That connection to the disciples of Christ, do you think that has anything to do with it?
Well, all good observations, Tom. I was expecting something more indigenous than this, but
I had something along that line too, but
I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, great observations. As you know from my work, I just focus on the narrative, and I don't stray much beyond that. I think it's a great idea about each of these. I can't remember if it was Michael I was talking to the other day, or Dan Vogel I was talking to the other day, who mentioned, do you think this has got anything to do with disciples of Christ? And I don't know. I don't think so much about origins. I don't think so much about the production end of things, but rather the product end of things. And so it might well be that. I mean, if I were someone who held the Book of Mormon to be scripture, I would be trying to wrestle to the ground what disciple means. And my expectation is that it means a heck of a lot more than a common noun. And some of the, the cues Val points to that are textual, I wouldn't veer far outside the text, but I mean, do those things give us an orientation in terms of just how significant these are? If I moved to kind of production end, I think all of those, and perhaps 1840, I don't know if that's too late, or 1837 even, but it would be interesting to see if these are paralleled in any way, right? So I mean, I think those are great questions, Tom, and maybe I could say before Roger asks a question, are there any questions I can answer?
Just more work to do.
Well, yeah, that's right. And so I have this very myopic kind of view, right? Paul was having a laugh about kind of the broad, my previous work that's so broad, and now we're talking about one letter, right? So.
Okay, Roger, you're next, and then Jonathan.
Okay, Chris, I wonder if you're going to have that kind of a level of detail of study, if you're going to be able to fairly keep calling yourself an outsider. I think that you've got a more depth of knowledge than a lot of people that I know, and I would like to have you come teach some things. I have a couple of questions.
Before you ask that, Roger, let me just say how appreciative I am that you would say that. I have found in life generally that it's better to follow Jesus' admonition of not sitting at the best table, but being called up. So
okay.
Thanks for that, my friend.
Sure. So one of the things that you brought up that I question, or I just don't understand, was, and I'm familiar with the original document, the original text being basically written out in about a 3-month period in 1829. What I'm not familiar with is when the printer's manuscript was made, and you were talking about how it seemed like there was a chance that Oliver could have been making changes to that printer's manuscript while it was also being published. So I don't know the time frame there. Maybe you do. Is that even a possibility, the way you're trying to describe that?
Here's my understanding, and it may be a misunderstanding. And as my wife would concur, it wouldn't be my first misunderstanding. My understanding is you've got the original manuscript, and that as a precaution, the printer's manuscript is being made. And this is an ongoing kind of exchange with Gilbert and Grandin. And what I think happened is the printer's manuscript, that bit that has been turned in earlier by Cowdery, etc., when he starts to see the proofs for the 1830 edition, he realizes that Gilbert is not capitalizing this, and by that point it's too late to change things. And so he modifies his practice kind of in midstream. But Scribe 2 never either doesn't get the memo or decides, by gum, I'm going to capitalize these anyway because they're supposed to be capitalized. So I think it's a pretty fluid sort of exchange. Now that's my best rendering of that process from the things that I've read. And some of you may know better than I about whether someone else was as involved in proofing the galleys as Oliver was. If he is the primary proofreader as they're coming off the press, then it would give some sort of explanation for why he changes, not only in the printer's manuscript, but he has written capital letters for disciples in the few places in the original manuscript that we have that contains the word disciple. So that seems to have been his practice, and something seems to have changed that. It may not be, I don't normally delve into historical reconstruction, but this reminded me a lot more of sort of New Testament text criticism. And you, of course, have to establish the text before you can interpret the text. And so that's kind of how I understand that, Roger. But I wouldn't bet the farm on my understanding of that process.
Okay, well, that's a fair possibility, and appreciate that. And the other thing you had mentioned, comparing to the King James and its lack of capitalization on disciples, do you or can you look at ancient manuscripts, Greek text, all the way the ones they're finding, they keep finding? Do those have any of that, or is that a whole nother realm that's not even looked at yet? I mean, I wonder about the same question on those manuscripts.
Yeah, so in a Greek New Testament, right, when you come to the word mathetes, disciple, there's really no, in the oldest manuscripts, they're all kind of lowercase. The only things that ever tend to get capitalized are proper names. And part of the challenge is that for a number of the major manuscripts, they're all in capital letters. I mean, everything. There's no word division. There's no sentence division. There's no punctuation. And so if we were producing the New Testament in a way that would resemble the way the Book of Mormon gets printed in the 1830 edition, that's when a decision would likely be made. Are these to be capitalized or not? And so there's a sense in which the Greek manuscript tradition is a bit of a dead end on that kind of issue.
Okay. Hey, well, I really appreciate your scholarly work, and thank you for that.
Oh, thanks so much, Roger. I appreciate it. And the honorary insider status. I appreciate that too.
Okay, Jonathan and then Wanda. Go ahead, please, Jonathan.
Okay, well, thanks, Chris, for your presentation.
Hey, Jonathan.
Of course, I had to see how Jonathan Edwards used these words,
All
right?
right. Exactly. Exactly.
So I pulled it up here. I was looking at the 1808 editions. And it turns out he kind of arbitrarily capitalized apostle or left it lowercase. There's about 50-50. And which is kind of surprising, really. He would capitalize the Apostle Paul in one case, and another time he would just say Apostle Paul without being capitalized.
Mm,
So that's just kind of a side note.
yeah.
On disciple, he rarely capitalized it, but occasionally he did. But of more interest to me was he talked about there is this is a quotation. There is a twofold use of the word disciples in the New Testament. He explained two different usages of the term there. So there may be some substantive source, since Joseph was a translator using these terms, that, this is the kind of thing I love to delve into when I have time. And you provoked another question. So, but it was fun for me to see that here's Edwards talking quite a bit. I used the term 300 times in different contexts, just in that 1808 set. But he did talk about different levels of discipleship, sort of, and how the term was used in the New Testament. So it wouldn't surprise me if Joseph was drawing on some of that as well. But as far as pure capitalization, it seems like almost always lowercase there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Those things that seem to have a number of parallels. And just to be clear, I'm not necessarily arguing that that disciples should or shouldn't be capitalized in the Book of Mormon. I'm trying to make sense out of that evidence. And I can't look at a text without at some point asking what the theological implications of this form of the tradition is. So no, well, thanks for that, Jonathan.
Okay, yeah, I guess all I'm saying is from a pure grammar standpoint, so to speak, mechanical, Edwards was arbitrary in it, and maybe Oliver was too, but there's also potentially a substantive reason there. So anyway, thanks again for your presentation.
And if we didn't have then the scribe 2 being so consistent, and if we didn't have Oliver early being consistent, then I would be more inclined to say, yeah, it's it's all fluid. It's the luck of the draw. But those are interesting patterns.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
But you wonder if Joseph told them capitalize it this time, which didn't seem very likely, but who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, thanks again.
Okay, Wanda, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to point out that I'm looking at my Restored Covenant edition just to see what they decided when Zarahemla Record Group put this together. And in First Nephi, I was surprised to remember that Nephi had asked to see the same vision as his father had seen. And right in the first chapter of Nephi, First Nephi, he talks about the vision of seeing, behold, the 12 disciples of the Lord, which I'm about to get my magnifying glass, which are chosen to minister unto thy seed, 12 disciples of the Lamb. And all of them are lowercase, where he refers to them. And then I found in Fourth Nephi as well, which I wanted to just try different parts of the books real quick. And in the first chapter there, in the 6th verse of our versification in this particular book, he says something about the apostles, and he doesn't capitalize those either. So I just wanted to point that out in case anyone was curious.
Yeah, that's a nice that's a nice touchstone to see how that develops in that part of the versional tradition.
In the poetic.
Yep.
print.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Wanda.
They must have consulted on that and decided to use the consistent form. Although I didn't look up all those in that short time, I had to consider it.
Right. Right.
The
Thanks, Wanda.
versification is the same as our Community of Christ versification. And I wondered what versification you had in your charts.
I used the LDS versification, though, as some of you may know, I try to use both when I'm looking in my Pentecostal Reads the Book of Mormon. I actually find the 1830 setup easier to follow and more attractive to read. And I have, some of you probably have seen something like this that gives you the 1830 edition with contemporary LDS versification, and I'm kind of then guessing or double checking, because I think Dell Luffman had given me a conversion chart, so I find my way around.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can buy a book now from the LDS church, I think. I have it. And it gives every single verse.
Gotcha.
And it's just a thin book. I started to make my own list at one point, but I gave up when I found that book.
Right. Righto. Righto.
A lot of work.
It is indeed. Thanks so much, Wanda.
Oh, just to add to that, if you want to find another list online, the Restorationists have one up on their Centerplace site, a comparison chart.
They have it too. Yeah.
Who was speaking just then?
That was Wednesday.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see. Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Faye. Yeah.
Okay. Gary, go ahead, please.
Hey, Gary.
Hi. People are talking about other places that you could look. You might consider looking if there's any correspondence where they talked about the Book of Mormon. Joseph wrote to anybody or Oliver wrote to anybody, see how they capitalized or didn't capitalize in their private conversations. And somebody mentioned that you might consider looking in the Doctrine and Covenants if you considered that as a form of correspondence of the sorts. I was just looking in, it's the LDS section 18 and in 20. It looks like apostle and disciple are all lowercase in those instances. That's section 16 and 17 in the RLDS version, but just something else to consider.
Oh, thanks very much. I appreciate that. And it's good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, nice to see you.
David, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Being somewhat of a nerd myself, I really appreciate what you've done here and the theological implications I'm going to have to struggle with for a while because I think, oh, that's fascinating. But to prove my own nerdiness, in your slide, and I unfortunately could not see the slide number, but I think it's the first slide where you mentioned the 12 in the Book of Mormon. You mentioned the 12 disciples and you use a lowercase. And then the rest through that slide, you use uppercase. And I was wondering if there really was a theological difference in those cases.
Well, that is dirty.
Right. So are you asking, in my description, am I following the capitalization that I find in the manuscript tradition? Is that what you're asking me, David?
Yes, I'm just asking, well, really, the question comes down to, was that a typo or is that deliberate?
I, you know, and Michael may rebuke me here, but I don't tend to believe in authorial intent. So I can't to myself say I intended that, but maybe there's some meaning in that. Oh, great, great. I should go back over that and make sure there's some form of some method to my madness.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, David.
I think it's my turn to jump in again. I wanted to go back to Val's comment because he pointed out that there's an inclination to elevate apostles, particularly in the LDS movement. I would counter that for myself, and I recognize that I'm only speaking for my own personal biases. But I found, as I was trying to decide which reunions to attend this summer, that when certain apostles were involved, then I went elsewhere. And so now on the other hand, there are some that I particularly appreciate, but I do not see in the community of Christ that apostles are elevated.
Bedtime.
I may be in error,
Can I
but
go with you?
certainly there is an inclination, I think, to, well, if we look back at our timeline on the apostles and look at the length of service that they provide, they're rather expendable. And where I think in the LDS church, they're probably more permanent.
You know, that's an interesting point, Paul. I suppose for me, if there is this elevation of language connected to the disciples and the broader narrative, the fact that we get near the end, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, where you get this more expansive use of disciple, it makes me wonder theologically if there's a sense in which discipleship itself is elevated, not in a haughty sense or anything like that, but the value of it, if it's not in some way, according to that, you know, in that last sort of reference where it's more general, is that kind of a democratization of disciples, and whatever then has been said about discipleship kind of gets, you know, this occurrence is in the train of all the rest. I mean, I haven't thought tons about all the theological implications, and I think a lot of good hints here and suggestions tonight are, if somebody follows along, and feel free to, that there may be more fruit to bear from that.
I particularly liked Thomas Murphy's comment about the disciples of Christ, because there where you employ the term in the name of the movement, that certainly is a means of elevating it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Deb, I think you're muted.
I was, thank you. James Lucas, you're next.
Thank you. And thank you for what I think the comments show was a very interesting presentation to at least this particular group of people. I may be displaying my ignorance. People here this all may be an old issue, but I'm going to try to out-nerd you by asking if there is, since the Scribe 2 is and his decision as to capitalization is a significant part of your findings here. Are there people who have thoughts about who Scribe 2 was, or do you have views about who Scribe 2 was?
Well, I know that you know, this can be the occasion of a knife fight. Try to identify scribes. The best I could figure from my reading of the Joseph Smith papers, volumes, and a conversation with Robin Jensen, there's some speculation that it may be Christian Whitmer, but that not everyone was convinced of that. I think that may have meant Skousen, and I don't know that for a fact, but that it wasn't agreed upon enough that they even speculated in the volume about the identity. I am that things like that seem way above my pay grade after I tried to trace out how people talk about scribal identity. And in kind of full disclosure, I rarely think in, say, New Testament text criticism about scribes by name. At any rate, you kind of get to know manuscripts better than the scribal tradition, though you can find out about certain of the scribes and their patterns, etc. So for me, that was not as important as the fact that Oliver had a consistent pattern that changes but is still consistent, and this whoever scribe 2 is consistently capitalized. And so, I mean, if there'd been like scribe 2, scribe 3, and scribe 4, that might have been nice in terms of some of the implications for the evidence of the different hands. But James, that to me is kind of what was and wasn't at stake in that scribal identity. But a helpful question.
Yeah, because one thing you could do is, if one could identify scribe 2 or had a theory as to scribe 2 was, one might look then at that person's other writings to see if they had the habit of doing more capitalization than perhaps was customary in the current English orthography or whatever. Anyway, that's
yeah
angle.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, Gary, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Chris, an off-topic question for you. I ran across a PhD paper that was written by John Christopher Thomas in May of 1990 on foot washing in John 13. Is that you?
It is I.
All right.
Yeah, and I've never rummaged around a whole lot on foot washing in the Restoration, but the bits that I have, I mean, I just finished reading Dan Vogel's Charisma Under Pressure, and it has a number of references to foot washing, and it seems to me that the meaning of foot washing that I see in John 13, which is often overlooked in favor of sort of a humility, servitude interpretation, is all the cleansing language that's clearly in the text of John 13, but at these strategic moments, that seems to be the primary meaning of those foot washings and preparing for the Kirtland Temple, et cetera, which has intrigued me all the more about how that has functioned in the Restoration. So I may even be nerdier than you think with my interests.
All right. Well, I just want to make sure that I had the right guy I was listening to when I read it.
You got him.
All right. Thanks.
Wednesday, go ahead, please.
Chris, I just wanted to let you know, if you want to check into feet washing and the Restoration, the Bickertonites have that as a sacrament.
Yeah,
So-
that's right. That's right.
So if you look into the Bickertonites or talk to some Bickertonites, and they also have stuff on their website that explains it, but definitely reach out with that.
Yeah, Daniel Stone and I have had long conversations about the parallels between the Church of Jesus Christ and kind of Pentecostal practice.
Yeah.
Not only with glossolalia, but the role of women, the integration of various groups and entities, and the foot washing, of course, immediately caught my eye in terms of how they treated that. It seems to me, well, I think I may have said this in my first visit with you all. I have wondered if there is some kind of pole or progression that groups in the Restoration, when I read the Book of Mormon and started learning about the early part of the tradition, I was reminded of this George Harrison quote where he was describing the first time he picked up an Indian sitar. And he said, it just felt familiar to me. And I remember as I read about that early part of the tradition and the Book of Mormon, it felt familiar to me in terms of the charismata, in terms of a number of sort of things. And I was struck by how close the Church of Jesus Christ was to that kind of ethos. And I began to wonder if you kind of charted out groups within the tradition, if that is the result of the more one buys into the Smith corpus, do they wind up further away from that more charismatic sort of understanding? And so that you get, you know, I've hung out with LDS folk a lot, and you seem to be, as we'd say here in the South, a fur piece from something like the Church of Jesus Christ. And so I've kind of wondered if the result of buying into more and more, and I don't mean that pejoratively, if that changes the scenario. Because Church of Jesus Christ, I think it's basically Bible and Book of Mormon, and the commandments kind of function in a non kind of scriptural fashion. So I don't know. I've wondered about that. And while I got the microphone, you know, in Pentecostalism, whoever's got the microphone's got the service. And so while I've got the microphone, you know, obviously I've paid a lot of attention to tongue speech, right, in the different parts of the tradition. And one of the distinctions that I've noticed, and it may be that my sample's not, I don't know enough about it, is that in Pentecostalism, when someone experiences what we would call spirit baptism and they speak in tongues, the first thing we do, for the most part, is to ask them to testify about their experience and what it means, or what it meant to them, what it was like. And in all the things on tongues that I've seen in the Restoration, I've never seen I've never seen that. It seems like glossolalia has functioned more in some ways like the Book of Mormon has functioned for people. It's a sign, but okay, we got the sign, now let's get on to, you know, the really important stuff. And so I've, you know, if any of you have run across things on that would be more similar, I'd be very interested in coming across that evidence and data. So that was just a throwaway. Sorry, Deb. Sorry to keep going on there on
Oh,
things that are non-scripted.
no problem.
I appreciated the information. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And we'd like to welcome back Stephen. It's been a long time. Hey, Steve, it's your
Yeah,
turn.
can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Christopher, how you doing?
Hey, Steve, I hadn't seen you in donkey's years.
I know, too long. So a few things. First of all, yeah, it's you know, of course, I had the privilege to attend a Church of Jesus Christ service where they actually did a foot washing service, and I remember actually sending you a photograph that Sunday morning, and it actually touched you very much. It was a really it was a touching thing for me, very powerful to actually experience a foot washing service within the context of the Restoration. And you had mentioned about Dan Vogel talking about foot washing a lot in his latest book. I will tell you, I interviewed Dan Vogel the other day for 2 hours, and we barely scratched the surface. I'm having him back on to talk, so keep an eye out for that. But you know, Christopher, I just wanted to ask you, as a Pentecostal who's been engaging the Restoration for a very long time, longer than I have, in one sense. I mean, both of us have been engaging it for decades, but mine's only been public for the last couple of years, and you've been doing your thing. What is really like your biggest takeaway as a Pentecostal engaging the Restoration, the people, and what have you learned from just engaging the texts and also engaging the people of the Restoration?
How long have we got? I mean, you know.
Wow.
Well, I don't know quite how to answer it. I mean, I remember when I began rummaging around in Book of Mormon stuff in earnest. I didn't know what people in the Restoration would make of a unicorn, right? Because as I soon discovered, there aren't that many of us, right? There are some, but, and it didn't hurt that my first real engagement, serious engagement, in some ways came through Dale Luffman, whom I decided to do was turning 60. I had a sabbatic coming. I had all this stuff, all this reading I'd done. I could never make sense of it. And I thought, by gum, I'm going to go somewhere and take a graduate level reading course in the Book of Mormon. And BYU wasn't quite set up to do that. And when I contacted Community of Christ Seminary, it was like, oh yeah, no, we'll be very glad for you to do that. And we have a guy who's just finishing a book on the Book of Mormon. And so Dale sends me this reading list, and I've read a lot of things on the list already. But he was such a gracious, hospitable presence. And, you know, I was treated royally when I came in for a week there in Independence, and was given access to the archives. And it was before before the printer's manuscript was transferred to Salt Lake. And, you know, they put in my hands Emma's wedding band, and they brought out the Bible and a seer stone. And I mean, I was very impressed with that reception. And then, of course, one of the people that I followed up with in that regard was in Nauvoo was Locke, and you know, we'd gone to a little seminar there, and I saw Locke on his hands and knees trying to hook up a power system in the room where everything was going on. I said, now that's the kind of apostle I can appreciate, right? And then, of course, and on the other end of the tradition, in Utah, I mean, I've been treated so well by so many colleagues, especially at the Maxwell Institute and at in the religious education group, lifelong friendships, and then of course through BOMSA in particular that some of the folk here have participated in. I mean, it's a great group. So I found that not only were there people that was interested in an outsider who was interested in the Book of Mormon, but treated me with such generous hospitality. And so I suppose that's kind of one of the overriding things in terms of the texts. I mean, what I know more about the Book of Mormon than I know about anything else, but I always feel like, despite the kind remarks of some of the previous speakers, that I know less about the Book of Mormon in any room I come into. And so somebody asked me once what was my favorite verse, and I said, I like the verse that says, don't run faster than you're able. I mean, that just seems to me to be right. But I've been very moved by the anti Nephi Lehi story. It was, dead in the center of the book. Such a powerful text. There are a lot of things that, the kind of, you got this dominant war narrative, and then you got this kind of subversive narrative under the top of all of that, that both content wise and structural wise critiques that narrative, which I kind of quite liked that. Obviously, the charismatic nature of the text. When I ran across the fact in Nephi that it talked about a baptism of fire and spirit, and the evidence apparently of that was people speaking in tongues or angelic languages. My eyes literally popped out of my head like those cartoon characters when they see something, because of course in Pentecostal understandings, spirit baptism is accompanied by speaking in tongues. And this is what, 70 years before the Pentecostal revival. And so, those things were just really, really interesting to me. And so a lot of wonderful people I've met. I've not quite connected with the Strangites, Bill Shepherd. I'm the closest I'm have come to that is, I know Kyle, and he's not a Strangite, but been trying to plot my trip up to Beaver Island at some point. Well, my poor family, they've made
Chris,
such allowances on our
Chris,
vacation.
Chris, you and I have got to make that trip together. And
Well,
yeah,
that's
Kyle
the
Shears is the Stephen Pinecker of the Strangites. And of course, I helped get David Boyce of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks connected to Bill to also do that wonderful video he did about the Strangite Church. And that's another group. Actually, the more and more research I've been doing on James Strang, I've learned to really kind of gotten to like the guy. I really respect him, and in many ways. So yeah, as an evangelical outsider, just like you, it's a real honor and privilege to actually have these conversations and build these relationships with each other, which I think is really important in this time where things are so divisive, and we can model how we can actually do this. It's actually possible that we can have these conversations with each other. Now, my battery is about to run out on my computer. So before it runs out, I want to make sure, I just want to say, I love all of you, and I'm so sorry I haven't been around for a while. And Chris, I love you so much, and I can't wait for us to start doing some more collaborations down the road as well.
Well, and let me just say before you go, Stephen, if you still got a little juice there, perhaps the most hospitable reception I've received is a group of people that would let me present a paper on capitalization.
This is why this is the most awesome group for regarding within the restoration. This is why I love this group. And yes, we can all do our Book of Mormon geek outs all the time here at the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum. And Paul, you're doing such a wonderful work, and Deb, and you guys are awesome.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chris. Yes, we are honored to have you both with us, and it is such a pleasure to have your outside views presented, and we are so deeply appreciative that you have been able to spend time with us, not just as presenters, but also as participants, to help us keep a balance and understanding and appreciation of the various perspectives on people on the Book of Mormon. Thank you so much.
I've been kind of waiting for well, he just disappeared. I was going to say I've kept waiting for Michael's response, but I think he's had to leave us. So there we are.
I would like to highlight that I've seen Laura Hathaway's name on the list this evening, and she is planning to come on the 31st to present for us. And so to give her a chance to make an introductory comment would be appropriate if she wants to tune on and unmute and give that a try. I also very much appreciate your recommendation of Michael Austin. I grabbed his email and I'll be happy to contact him and see when we can get him to fill in. It is just most gratifying that people who are interested in these topics continue to reinforce each other. And I'm in the reunion session today. This question came up about why it is that Community of Christ church officials tend to not want to participate in this kind of a forum. And Chris Judd was responding. She is an employee of the church, and she pointed out that this is rather a daunting forum for anybody to have to approach. And particularly if you're presenting a view that is not as supportive of traditional values as many of these people have been. On the other hand, last week we had John Charles Duffy, and his vantage point was clearly one that saw the Book of Mormon as a novel. And so the idea that we have these diverse viewpoints and people with those diverse viewpoints still hold some value in the book, seeing some scriptural sense in it that makes it worth reading, that pleases me. Wednesday, your hand's back up.
Are sharing out at the end. If anyone would like to attend a Beyond the Wall service next Sunday on the 16th, I'll be the one bringing the message. And as I like to do, I will be mainly speaking from the Book of Mormon. And that it doesn't happen as often as I would like on the international services, or sometimes even within congregations. So it will be a bit from Luke, but also a lot from the Book of Jacob. So if you would like to hear me talk about the Book of Jacob, then they'll be on there online at 12 p.m. EST and 6 p.m. EST on the 16th.
Thank you for highlighting that. Perchance Wednesday, will that be taped?
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube.
Good. I will be at Spectacular, and so we'll probably not have a chance to participate in that one, but I would like to pick it up afterwards because, well, and let me intrude just a little bit, because for you to be speaking to one of the largest Community of Christ congregations, and what is your office?
I'm not even baptized yet. They finally got the pool ready. So it looks like it's going to happen this month. I've been waiting since April. So my office is not even member. My office is friend.
Isn't that beautiful? That is, thank you for letting me set that one up. That is just so beautiful. I'm so pleased that you as a friend are able to participate in this profound manner.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a rare opportunity. We've had a lot of good conversation and a lot of good discussion. A tremendous presentation, of course. I don't want to shut it down prematurely, so.
Paul, let me do one more thing.
Hey, sure.
Let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
There I am
Yes.
next to the Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a decent job.
Yeah, he's very good, my colleague. And that's him across the street in the blue shirt.
Oh, really?
Good.
So, look at
So
what,
there you are.
look at what the hippie generation has generated, huh?
That's exactly right. Peace, love, and not drugs, but
And Abbey Road.
there you go. There you go.
Peace, love, and nerds.
There we go. Indeed. Hey, I really appreciate it again. Thanks so much for the invitation tonight.
Wanda has a hand up.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
just want to tell Chris that we share a last name. I was a Thomas before I became a Stubbert.
Well, we may be kin.
I know. It'd be interesting to find out.
I don't know if I could be that lucky or not, but yeah, that'd be great.
It was just a passing thought when I saw your name the first time.
I found out recently that Terrell Givens and I may be distant cousins. So what about that, Val?
Yeah, they have in, there's a software program called Relatives Around Me, which everybody that's standing in a room can turn on their cell phone and it'll tell you how you're connected to people. And we do that in meetings at different times. And if anytime you're with some other folks, with your cell phones proximate, just log into Relatives Around Me and it will tell you how you're connected. We often end up being related to people. Might be eighth cousin or ninth cousin, but sometimes even closer.
Oh, that's good. My brother said the reason we don't have family reunions is we can't get everybody out on parole on the same weekend.
Okay, Joetta's got her hand up. Go ahead, please, Joetta.
I just wanted to thank Christopher. I really appreciate that. I read a lot, so those kind of things are really interesting to me. But I have something here, and maybe he might just like to know this. I'm reading Letters of Oliver Cowdery from 1834 to 1835. And I just glanced through it, and all the apostles are in the lower caps. So that's just a little bit of information for you, Christopher.
Hey, thanks so much.
Okay.
Maybe Gilbert had a lasting influence on him, if my theory is right.
Okay. Just thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Good job, Joetta.
Did I get a better grade? Are you going to give me a better?
You've been pretty quiet recently, but that helps to make up for it when you come up with a good.
Oh, that's right.
Like
That's
that.
right.
Thank you.
Well, the fat lady's about to sing if we don't have any more hands up. Good night, the Lord is watching o'er you. Good night, his blessings go before you. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night, may God bless you. And thank you all for participating with us. It's just a delight to have this